Hey, how you doing? Nick James here. What a phenomenal time to be alive. Episode number 8 of Open and Real Q&A with Nick J. I'm joined by the one and only Javala. Let's get stuck in, mate. What you got for me today?
Okay, so the first two are going to be from Nick Barrow.
Yes.
And the first one is, where do you see yourself and EE in the next 5 years?
Where do I see myself and EE in the next 5 years? So I'm going to answer it in two parts, Nick, if that's all right with you. Because I think the two are different. So where do I see myself in 5 years? I think, well, in 5 years' time, Zach will be 18. That's scary to think that. He's 13 now. Zach will be 18. Ty will be 14. That's scary as well. They'll all be growing up. So I think the sad thing is, and I'm guessing parents that are watching or listening to this have either had this experience or will have this experience. I'm like, mine and Nat's lives are going to be really different it's only 5 years, which doesn't seem like that long, but you know, what your kids want from you, need from you when they're 14 and 18 is very different to what they want and need from you when they're 9 and 13. So I'm aware that we will be less needed, which I think, you know, on a positive will probably give us more freedom. Not that we don't already have freedom. I can see my mum watching or listening to this going, you two have a lot of freedom. You're going away to London this weekend and I'm having the kids. And we do have a lot of freedom. We're very fortunate in that respect. And even more of that. So we'll probably do more traveling, I suspect, in 5 years' time than we do right now. Where do I see EE in 5 years' time? Well, we've got our mission, which I share a lot. Nick, you've heard me talk about it, seen it displayed on the screen when I've spoken at Expert Empires and shared at Mastermind. So I'm very clear on where Expert Empires is going to be in the next 2 years. So like by the end of 2024, we've got a very clear revenue goal, number of tickets sold to our events goal, number of clients goal. So I actually don't see the business model changing that dramatically in the next couple of years. But then the exciting bit is at the end of 2024, we then get to map out the next phase of our growth, the next mission. And at that point, we'll be able to explore what other business models we might bring into play. We are already looking at that and testing a few things, of course. I see the Expert Empires, the main difference probably I see is the main kind of Expert Empires flagship events. I see growing in size, but only to a certain point. I think I might have spoken about this on this Q&A before. I actually don't see the Expert Empires event in its current form growing beyond maybe 1,000 to 1,200 attendees, mainly because as soon as you go bigger than that, you need a different type of venue. I don't really want to go to like a big exhibition venue because I think you lose a bit of the intimacy of it. And I've been to events like that where you all attend and then of course at the end of the day, everyone disperses and goes back to their various hotels. Whereas when you can run an event in a hotel, it means that you get to, most of the people then stay and they can connect with each other in the bar and the restaurant, all that kind of stuff afterwards. Whenever I've attended events, I've really liked that environment. And as soon as those events have got bigger and gone out to a different environment, I've never enjoyed them as much. That said, how we expand or plan on expanding Expert Empires, the flagship event, and reaching more people is by doing it in different locations. So we're already in talks to do Expert Empires next year in a different country, and we'll probably gradually do that. I'm not expecting to go from 2 events a year in London to 10 events internationally next year. We'll test a different location next year, which I said we're already in talks and thinking about, and then maybe in 24, 25 and beyond, we might get to the point where we do 4, 5, 10 Expert Empires events all over the world as things develop. But that's kind of where I see Expert Empires in the next 5 years, Nick. Hope that answers your question.
Love it.
Cool. What you got next? Jav?
So Nick also asks, what do you see your kids doing in 5 years?
Oh, okay. What do I see my kids doing in 5 years? Well, Ty will be 14, so he will be at school, I hope. He will probably still be playing football. I'd be amazed if that's not the case. Zach at 18 is going to be, who knows, could well be in higher education, could be at uni, if that's what he wants. Funnily enough, I was talking to a few of our clients at dinner last week about this. And I was saying, look, I've got no rules that says either of my kids have to go into higher education. If they want to do that, then they'll have my full support. But equally, if they don't want to do that, there'll be certainly no obligation on my part for them to do that. He might choose to start his own business. He might choose to come into our business. He might go off in a career direction that doesn't require higher education or my support or assistance, which is completely up to him. So I don't know. I suppose all parents have to go through this experience, and it's a strange thought for me still with the age my kids are at. It's a strange thought for me to think of a time where both my kids won't be living with us and whereby I'm not a big part of whatever they're doing day in, day out, week in, week out. But I suppose that's part of being a parent and having your kids grow up. And I'm sure some of you that are watching this, that are listening to this, have been through that, and you're going, yes, I've been through that. And Nick, you've got no idea what's coming, or you're like me and you're kind of seeing that that's the future. But I guess 5 years isn't that far in the future for both of them. If you'd have asked 10 years, I'd have gone, no idea. One thing I do know, that kid is off the charts. Like, there's no way in the world he'll take a normal path in anything. Me and Nat have said from day one, like, he's a one-off and he'll end up doing something crazy. Like, he'll end up being like a stand-up comedian or a musician or an actor or something crazy. Like, not the traditional path that you would expect most people to take, but who knows. Zach's a lot more like me, so probably more likely to kind of follow in my footsteps, but who knows? A lot can happen between the age of 13 and 18, so let's see.
Absolutely. Slight follow-on question for me.
Yeah.
Hold
on. Is this allowed?
I think so.
Jav's chucking in his own questions now. You see, he's got comfortable 8 episodes in. He's now trying his luck. Go on, Jav.
We've done 8 episodes.
I'll allow it.
How invested are the kids in personal development? Like, obviously they're around it a lot. And
Yeah. Look, I suppose there's a few different answers to this question. One, they probably pick up a lot just by osmosis, just being around me and my wife, Nat, my mum and Tone. Like, my mum, for those that don't know, my mum and her husband Tony have been in the personal development world for 25, 30 years, had their own coaching business, events business, then were part of our company for a few years. So, they live and breathe the kind of personal development world as I do. So, my kids have been surrounded by that from a very young age. The second thing is they do, as those that have attended our Expert Empires events will know, they attend those events. This might not be, not everyone might agree with this, but we do take them out of school for 2 days, twice a year, which in my view, personal opinion, 4 days a year out of school in the huge scheme of things I feel like the pros of doing that outweigh the cons, that they get to experience, what I do. And I guess from a selfish point of view, I love having them around at our events. There's been times in the past where, I was doing a lot of speaking, a lot of events, and I was on my own, and quite frankly, I didn't enjoy it. Whereas, having Nat and the boys there makes the experience of running Expert Empires a lot more enjoyable and well-rounded for me. So they're exposed to, they sit in and watch the speakers, and, Ty's not always paying attention, but I just trust that it's going in unconsciously. I also trust that they kind of just delete the swearing as and when that takes place.
Rob
Rob Moore, Paul Mort, I'm talking to you in particular. And then more intentionally, more deliberately, I have, Zach in particular has participated in some kids only personal development events, experiences. In fact, both experiences that come to mind are clients, former and current clients of ours. So one of our former clients ran like a 1-day personal development mindset event for kids, and Zach went along, and I've never forced it. I've always just said, hey, this is happening, do you want to go? And he's always been really, really up for it. And then more recently, I talk about this a lot. One of our clients, his name's Tom Owens, actually runs a football coaching academy up in Liverpool, but also runs, he's rebranded it. It was called Mindset Academy, and now it's called Superhero Academy or something? I can't remember the name of it, which is specifically for 9 to 13 year olds. And so Zach's been through that once. I think that was earlier this year or last year. And Ty obviously has only just turned 9, so he hasn't been through it yet, but the next one will be happening in January, I believe. And so Ty's, I already asked him and he wants to go through that. Zach might go through it again anyway. So I'm always on the lookout for any kind of training or coaching or content that my kids can digest and study. But equally, I think it's important not to force it upon them. I was fortunate that my mum really didn't force anything upon me. I always say that she became an example of what's possible. She went from working in a corporate career, not very happy, failed marriages times 2, not healthy. And then all of a sudden, literally in the space of 12 months, I turned her life around completely. And so I was only, probably 12 at the time. And she went, well, I'm going to Hawaii for 2 weeks to go to this Tony Robbins event. Do you want to come with me? And I'm going, I've seen this transformation in my mum and how much it's changed her, for the better. And so, I want to be part of that. I also wanted to go to Hawaii for 2 weeks instead of staying at home in Birmingham going to school. But that was the reason I made the decision. But yeah, I think my advice would be, I think you've got to be an example, and you've got to, rather than force and push, you got to create the opportunities for your kids, your children to choose to take, would be my advice. And that's certainly what I've tried to do with my 2.
Nice, thank you.
Cool. No worries. You're allowed 1 question every 8 episodes. That's the deal, all right?
Yeah, all right. Okay, so the next question is from Robin Hayhurst.
Yeah.
Not me.
All right, go on then, Robin. What you got?
So he says, I've listened to you talk about starting again with no clients after you and a business partner parted ways. What happened and what did you learn from it? How does it affect how you do business now?
Okay, yeah. So thanks for the question, Robin. And, I'm always more than happy to share, the good, the bad, the ugly. In the spirit of keeping the answer short, because obviously what happened is a very broad question to a complex subject. The long story short is myself and my business partner had built a company together. It was actually 2 separate businesses. Mine was essentially a marketing education business, so I would run workshops and masterminds on marketing specifically, and his was in a similar vein. We merged our businesses together, the theory being that, the power of his team, my team, our combined knowledge, understanding, experience, wisdom. Not that we had a lot of wisdom, because we were both in our mid-20s at the time, I think, mid to late 20s. We felt if we pooled our resources, we could grow a bigger, more successful company, which was in theory true. We managed to go from both running multi-6-figure businesses to combined. Within a few years, we'd taken the business to nearly 3 million a year in revenue. The downside was that there was some fundamental differences in how I wanted to run the business and how he wanted to run the business, and it wasn't financially sound. Let's just say that and leave it there. what ended up happening was we parted ways. It was very painful for me at the time. We're now, water under the bridge. We're good friends. We spent a full day together just a couple of weeks ago, so it's all good. But it was very painful for me because what I realised later on was I'd created this link between my identity, my self-worth, and being the co-owner of this company. And so how has it affected how I do business today? Well, a couple of things. The first thing, I remember, I only realised this, it was a couple of years later, as a result of doing some work with my coach, where I realised there was still, a couple of years later, I hadn't really got the lesson, there was still this link between my self-worth, my identity, and the success of my business. And so we did a lot of work on that, and I like to think that, I've managed to kind of decouple those two things now. That's not to say that I don't want business to succeed and that I don't feel good about myself when it does. That would be a lie. But my happiness and self-worth is independent of the success of the business. We can have a really bad week and I can still be happy at a weekend. That was not the case years ago. So how it affects how I do business now, that's one thing. And secondly, I think what's great, I learned a lot of lessons as a result of that partnership. So there was a lot of things that my business partner was good at that I wasn't so good at, and vice versa. And I think I learned a lot of lessons, from that experience. I was young, naive, probably a bit greedy, chasing the money, as was he. He wouldn't mind admitting that either. And so we made some questionable decisions because of that. And I'd like to think that now I'm making much more mature decisions. Don't get me wrong, we're still striving for aggressive growth because that's the game that I love to play and that we're playing here at the Empire Group. That said, I'd like to think that the decisions we're making are more, we're factoring in there's other influences in our decision making rather than just how we're going to drive more revenue. We're making some smarter decisions. And, I think I've actually built the team taking what I think were the best bits of that business, because we actually had some really good stuff in there. Like, we had a great culture, we had a lovely team, they were amazing people, and I think we've done the same here. And there's been a lot of things I've done differently as a consequence of that experience. How I run the financials being a big one, how I choose to manage my time and my energy being another, for sure. I actually think being the sole, obviously I've got Elite Closing Academy, which is a partnership with Matt Elwell, but I think being the CEO and the sole shareholder business owner of Expert Empires, well, my wife's a shareholder, but the sole kind of CEO and figurehead of Expert Empires is actually good for me in that it causes me to take more responsibility than I did before. When I was in a partnership, it was kind of like I had some responsibility, but also my business partner did too, whereas I feel like this empowers me to take more responsibility for my own, how I show up, how I choose to live my life. Certainly make a lot better choices now, although that could just be an age thing. I'm aware that probably everybody listening or watching this is going, yeah, well, when I was in my 20s, I made some stupid ass decisions as well. And, as I got towards 40, those who are keeping track, I am, I think, 3 weeks away from being 40. Yeah, obviously you start to slow down, make smarter decisions through the benefit of experience.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, so the next one is from Naya Waters.
Yes.
She's asking, how do you generate questions for your own coaches?
Yeah, great question. So Naya is a member of our mastermind, so knows I have a number of different coaches that I work with on different areas of life and business. So I think one of my coaches, who I'd say is my main coach, I talk about him a lot, the amazing Jeff Mask. He has something in his coaching structure, which I think is really good, which is, 48 to 72 hours before each coaching session, he asks for the big 3 topics that you want to discuss in that session to be submitted. And I don't think it really matters what the big 3 are. It just matters that I take a couple of minutes, it's not even long, to go, right, so for example, I've got a session with him, I think later this week. So probably today, this afternoon, I'll take 2 minutes and go, right, what are my big three for my session with Jeff? What are the three things that are most critical that I want to discuss, that I'm struggling with, that I need to give some space and some energy to, and I'll submit those in advance. I think just the simple act of taking the time to consider what those big three, and sometimes it's two and sometimes it's four, but he calls them the big three. I think that's time well spent, time well invested. And it doesn't really matter what those things are. It's just having the focus and the intention before you go into the session. I also think that the more specialised your coaches are, the better. So Jeff coaches me specifically on being the CEO of this group of companies. And so the big three that I'll submit will be related to my role as CEO. That said, we do also cover off sometimes some more personal stuff. But then I've got a nutritionist. So clearly the questions that I'm going to ask, or the big three that I'll have prepped for those sessions, will be very specific. Whereas I think if you have a coach who's there to coach and support on all the things in your life, it's actually more difficult to prep for those sessions, or to think about what questions you want answered or what topics you want to discuss. I think the more specialised, the more focused, the more niched the coaching, the mentoring, the support is, the easier it is for you to get value from it, in my opinion.
Wicked. Okay, so the final question is from Claire Morton.
Yes.
So, what or who drains you?
Okay. Have we had this question before? Feels like we might have, or we might have had a variation on it. Yeah. So, what or who drains me? Okay. So, any time I am not looking after my body, and specifically, because it's rare that I ever have more than 2 or 3 days without any physical exercise. Very rare. But I'd say when it comes to like what I'm putting in my body, so hydration, nutrition, like if, for example, and I do, this is called open and real Q&A, so let me be open and real, I might have the occasional weekend where I eat a bit of crap and I drink too much alcohol. Like that still happens occasionally, not as much as it used to, but occasionally. And that drains my energy. Like that does not set me up for success. Who drains me is a more difficult question. What I'd say is when I'm in delivery mode, so when I'm running mastermind meetings, for example, and our rhythm, so we've actually got 4 different mastermind groups. And so 3 of them actually run on consecutive days every other month. So typically I'll have like a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday where I've got mastermind meeting 1, 2, 3 back to back. I'm not gonna lie, by the end of those 3 days, I'm wiped, because energetically I've been in giving mode for 3 days straight. I've not been filling back up. So I find those days, or the 3 days, quite challenging. But the good news is I recover quite quickly. So, I ordinarily only really need like 24 hours. When we do like an Expert Empires event, normally they're Thursday, Friday, and often we've done those events and they're early starts and late finishes. Jav, you've been there. And generally speaking, we'll finish the event on the Friday evening. I normally stay over because Nat and the kids are there anyway, and it'd be too late to drive back. So we normally stay over, have a nice meal, couple of drinks, good night's sleep, bit of a lie-in, and I'm good. Normally that's enough for me to recharge and overcome any draining that might have occurred. By the way, by the end of those 2 days, I'm empty. Not just drained, empty. But normally it doesn't take me that long to recover. I think I've probably, having been running events first event was 2009, so 13 years of running events, I've built up a tolerance, if you like, to be able to do that, to like drain energy, stand on stage and speak and be mentally and emotionally, at it for 2 or 3 days consecutively. I built the muscle, if you like. Just look, I mean, like any great athlete has tuned their body to be able to perform and then recover quickly or quicker than your average human being. By the way, I'm doing my best on that front, but I'm not an elite athlete yet, nor will I probably ever be, because I'm not focused on that 24/7. But when it comes to this, when it comes to standing on a stage or speaking in front of a group of people consecutively for 2-3 days, I've built a tolerance and an ability to recover for my body, physically, mentally, emotionally, to recover from that quickly, because I've been doing it 13 years. Given thousands of speeches and run, I mean, it'd be multiple thousands of days of training over the years. So you build up a tolerance to be able to do that, just like anybody does. The more you do something, the more your body, your mind gets used to doing it. So I'd say that does drain me, but I do recover quite quickly. Who drains me? People that whinge and moan drain me. People who aren't willing to take responsibility for their actions, for how they think, for how they feel, for the current situation they find themselves in. That drains me, because I believe that we are all 100% responsible for everything we create, everything we think, everything we feel. Now, I'm not saying that that's scientifically true, but I believe that when you operate from that place, things tend to work better. And I think whenever anyone is in like blame mode, and it's their spouse or their parent or their kids or the government or their staff or whoever's fault, that drains me. And I'm not very patient with that. I pretty much just want to give people a slap and say, how is this all your fault? How have you created this? And how have you created it is actually a great question. Like, one that I ask myself. It's actually a question that my mum asks all the time with her coaching clients. How have you created this? She actually says, how's this all your in fault, when she's feeling really impatient. She's got a unique style of coaching, does my mum. But yeah, I always like to ask myself that question. If something isn't going the way I want, I ask myself, how have I created this? And that question tends to stimulate my mind to come up with an answer that's more helpful, because then I can do something about it. But yeah, people that whinge and moan and don't take responsibility, they drain me. The end. Thank you everyone for the questions. Keep them coming in. The more questions we get, the more frequently we'll put episodes out. This is episode 8. Hopefully you're enjoying Open Real Q&A with Nick J so far. Send your questions in to Jav, J-A-V, at expertempires.com, and then Jav will sit here more regularly asking me more questions so we can create more episodes. So thanks for watching on YouTube, listening on the podcast, and remember, as always, more you connect, more you correct.